Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Neha Hamilton, and we are covering this subject called research methods in management. And today we are going to understand a very important topic from research, and that is called as research instrument. So today we are going to cover about all the research instruments which are very important part to execute any research successfully. If you do not have a research instrument, then you do not have any medium for data collection. So basically, the research instrument serves as a medium for you to collect data, right? So, uh, the lecture objectives of today's class is to have a good understanding on the concept of research instrument, point number one. Point number two is to understand the various types of research instruments that uh, that we can use. Point number three, what is the right research instrument according to the research subject that you have taken? One of the most important components of a research design is research instrument because they gather or collect data or information. As I have discussed you, as I have discussed with you, that research instrument is basically a medium. It is a tool for data collection. It is a tool for data gathering, right? So it is one of the most important components of research design. Now, again, what is research design? Research design is actually the blueprint of how you are going to do your research. It starts with problem definition, starts with sampling design, it starts with what kind of statistical techniques you are going to use, what is your research design, and all these kind of things will come in research design. So research design is very important when it comes to choosing the right research instrument, because research design has important feature. Every research design has different kind of research instruments which needs to be used. For example, if you have exploratory research, then you are going to use different instrument. If you are going to use descriptive research, then you are going to use different instrument. If you are going to use causal research or experimental research, then different kind of research instrument you are going to use. So first we have to have a clarity that what is research instrument. So it is a tool. What kind of tool? It is that kind of tool that helps us to collect data so that we can analyze the data, we can test the hypothesis, and we can tell them that these are the results, inferences, or conclusion of my research. What is written in the slide? Research instruments are the tools, are the way of gathering data, and without them, the data would be impossible to put in hand, right? So, what is research instrument? It is a tool of gathering information about the data. You want to collect data for particular research purposes, and if you do not have a research tool, then you will not be able to collect information on that particular research. Let's move further. The first research instrument, which is very famous that we are going to talk about, is called as questionnaire. Now, what is questionnaire? The most common instrument or tool of research for obtaining the data beyond the physical reach of the observer, which, for example, may be sent to human beings who are thousands of miles away or just around the world. So, what questionnaire is all about? In questionnaire, we want to collect data from the respondent to whom we cannot approach, or the people who are sitting far away from us. Is very difficult to go. It is it is consuming a lot of resources to reach that particular individual. So in that particular scenario, we use questionnaire, right? What is questionnaire? It is the most important instrument. There are set of questions that we need the respondent to answer. On the basis of these answers, we actually analyze the data, we gather the data. First is we do data editing, we do data coding, and then we go for data analysis. But first we need to have data, and that data is covered with the help of questionnaire. Okay. Now there are two forms of questionnaire. The first is called as closed form and the second is called as open form questionnaire. So the closed-ended questionnaire is a questionnaire which has fixed set of objective questions. Now there are two types of questions. The first is called as objective question and the second is called as subjective question. Right? When I talk about objective questions, that means I am asking for your answer from the four set alternatives, right? I'm not giving you uh, freedom to answer that question. I have given you four choices, and you have to choose between these four choices. So that becomes closed questionnaire, right? When there is no more scope of explaining the answers. For example, if I ask you that, in your opinion, how are the services provided by Hotel ABC? Um, the services specifically regarding to the spa, right? So answer number one is I am extremely happy. Then answer number B is I'm somewhat happy. Then option number three is I don't know. Maybe you have not used that services. Then option number four is that you are happy, you are not happy, and the next option is the bad services are provided by the hotel industry. So this is called as open, closed-ended questionnaire. I have given you five responses. You have to answer in these five responses. There is no more scope of yours, changing your answer or uh, giving right type of answers. Now we are going to talk about open-ended questionnaire. Now what are these open-ended questionnaire? Open-ended questionnaires are those questionnaires which help to answer the questions in which we are giving a lot of scope to the researcher. We are telling the researcher to answer the question, give his opinion, and give his or her perspective on a particular topic. For example, if we are asking for the feedback and if we are asking that what are, in your opinion, what are the points on which the spa services of a particular hotel should consider on, or what are the points that they should learn on, right? So that is called as closed-ended questionnaire, right? When you do not have any scope of answering any further, you have fixed set of questions, you have points written over there, you have objective set of questions, you have to choose among the options which are given. It is called as closed-ended questionnaire. Closed, no scope for further exploring, no scope for further explaining. When I talk about open-ended questionnaire, open scope of answering and explaining. You can write down your opinion, you can give your perspective, you can show your anger, you can show your satisfaction through your words. So that is called as open-ended questionnaire. Now, these are some guidelines that you should follow as a researcher when you are using a questionnaire, right? Whenever you are using a questionnaire, it is very important to have clarity of language. Now, when I talk about clarity of language, that means it is always advisable to use very easy language, very simple words, because you can have different type of respondents. When I say different type of respondents, means you can have respondents who are very educated. You can have respondents who are not educated at all. You can have respondents who have good knowledge uh, on a particular topic. You can have respondents who have language problem. You can have respondents who do not know anything about that particular thing. So clarity of language, simplification of diction is really important when it comes to uh, questionnaire, right? Sometimes you may have to facilitate in answering the questions because respondents, they are not very uh, educated, they are not literate. So you have to ask them and you have to facilitate them in answering the questions. Next is singleness of purpose. See, what is the basic motive of defining a research problem? The only motive of designing the research problem is clarity of objective and singleness of purpose relevant to the objective of the study. Whenever you design a hypothesis, then only after that you have to uh, design a questionnaire, right? The first step is you have to decide the research design. After you have clarity in mind about your research purpose, research design, then the next step goes is uh, how relevant your topic is for a particular study. You have to use the correct grammar to answer those questions. So guidelines in using the questionnaire play, you have to keep these guidelines in mind. Clarity of language, very important. Use simplified words, simple language to explain whatever you want to ask them, right? As simple words as possible, right? Next is singleness of purpose. You should have clarity on in your mind regarding what is your purpose of study, relevant to the objective of the study. So, whatever questions you are asking, you should make sure that every question is contributing in finding out the answer of a problem, right? So, you should have a clear idea on what kind of questions should be asked, how many closed-ended questions and how many open-ended questions should be put it in a question. Correct grammar. See, whenever you are sending a questionnaire, say for online, through mail, through post, you are that questionnaire is actually representing yourself as a researcher, right? So if a piece of paper is representing you as a researcher, so it's better that you take care of the quality of the questionnaire that you are making for the respondents. So it is very important to check the grammar again and again. It is very important to check the spellings again and again that you are using. Now, what are the principles to consider constructing a questionnaire, right? What are the steps that you follow whenever you make a questionnaire? It is important to understand those steps also. The first step in designing a questionnaire is define or qualify the terms that could easily be misinterpreted. See, right communication is very important when it comes to questionnaire. When I say right, communication means your question should be communicated in the right meaning as well as in the right tone that you want to ask from the respondent. The tone should be right, the meaning should be right. Be careful in using descriptive adjectives and adverbs that has no agreed upon meaning. So sometimes we use very difficult words, sometimes we use very casual language in asking the questionnaire. Try to avoid these kind of casual languages in questionnaire because it is a formal document through which you are collecting data and it is going to hundreds and thousands of people in the society. So it is very important to simplify your language, to correct your diction, and careful in writing descriptive adjectives and adverbs. Be careful of inadequate alternatives, right? Whatever inadequate alternatives, if you are using closed-ended questionnaire, then you are clear that whatever scale you are using, if you are using Likert scale, you are going to have fixed number of alternatives. If you are using a open-ended questionnaire, then also it is important. Then also it becomes important for you to choose the right kind of things. Beware of double negative, right? Double negative means do not present. a negative image in the front of the respondent. Avoid double barreled question. Double barreled means the question is having two layers. Try to make two questions instead of one question, asking two different things at different times, right? That gives clarity in the mind of the researcher that in this question I have to answer this point, in this question I have to answer this point, right? Clarity in answering the question will be there only if the question is clear, if the question is simple and single layered, right? Underline the word if you wish to indicate special emphasis. Avoid the double barrel question. I would like to give an example on this particular point. For example, are you satisfied with the behavior of staff and the quality of products used in the spa treatment in ABC hotel? So what am I asking? I'm asking two different things from you, no? I'm asking the quality of products that they are using during those spa. This means kind of, creams, kind of massage treatment, and quality of those products is different. And when I talk about the behavior of people, whether they are courteous, good to you, polite to you, humble to you or not. So these are two different things that I'm asking. But how can I ask you in a single question and ask you answers for two different questions? That cannot happen. That is not correct, right? So avoid the double barreled question. Underline the word if you wish to indicate special emphasis. So it is very important to underline the word that you do not know, the word which is emphasized on that particular question. For example, how is the quality of welcome drink served? Question mark. Now, quality of welcome drink is something which is important. So just underline that word. Next is when asking for rating or comparisons, a point of reference is necessary. It is always advisable to give a sample question and a sample answer to the respondent so that he gets an idea on how the questions has to be answered, right? How the questions has to be answered. For example, write down a question. For example, what was the quality of what was the quality of uh, the dishes which were served in dinner, right? This is my question. So if I loved the food, if I praised and delighted to have that food, then I will take on strongly agree. In bracket, I will write down that I was very happy with the food quality, with the food taste, with the variety in the menu. This I will write down in bracket. So that the respondent will get an idea that I am very happy with that food. That's why I am taking on 5, which means I am very much delighted to have that food, right? So it is very important on answering these questions. Giving a sample question is very important. Answering the sample question, write the note in bracket that why you have chosen that particular alternative. When asking for ratings or comparisons, a point of reference is necessary. I've given you the example. Avoid unwarranted assumptions. Unwarranted assumptions means assumption which is new to the researcher, assumption which researcher doesn't know about. Raise questions so that they are appropriate for the respondents. Design questions that will give a complete answer, right? So phrase questions that are appropriate to all the respondents. Appropriate to all the respondents means maybe uh, you know a personal swimming pool is given to very limited number of respondents who are availing the facilities of the hotel. Only premium customers use that you know, use that king suite or king queen suite in a particular hotel, right? So you cannot ask the question about the quality of the personal swimming pool that they were providing, because very less people are given this kind of opportunity to use that. So design questions that give a complete answer is also important, right? So whatever options you are choosing in response to a particular question, that options should cover all the dimensions. That's why we always recommend to use any particular statistical scale for answering the questions of the questionnaire. If you are using Likert scale, you have different points to tell the researcher. You have different kind of grades on which the researcher can decide. Consider the possibility of classifying the respondents yourself rather than having the respondents choose the category, right? So you have to classify the respondent. The respondent do not have to classify your categories, right? So if you are making different categories of the respondents, design the questionnaire according to them. For example, if I'm talking about premium customers who are residing in King Suite or Queen Suite, they are paying some extra money. They are taking some extra advantages also. So you have to make different questionnaire for that category. The people who are living in a basic room, you have to take their responses also. Next is facilitates data gathering. What are the advantages of questionnaire that we have to understand? So the first advantage is facilitates data gathering or data collection. Is easy to test data for reliability and validity. So the basic advantage is to test data for reliability and validity of data, less time consuming than interview and observation. Okay, so it consumes very less time as compared to interview and observation. Why it consumes less time? Because in the interview it is a long process. You have to make rapport building with the respondent so that he becomes comfortable with you, he gives you all the answers correctly. But when you are talking about uh, you know a specific type of an individual, less time consuming that the interview. So a questionnaire you are giving to respondent, he just have to read the question and answer the question. If you are doing an observation, again it is going to take a lot of time. How it is going to take a lot of time? Because when you are talking about observation, you are talking about observing any particular individual on a particular thing or particular method. So it preserves the anonymity and confidentiality of the respondent's reactions. And so the best advantage of questionnaire is that there is a secrecy, a confidentiality is maintained. Okay. Next is what is disadvantages. The disadvantages are printing and mailing are costly. Response rate may be low, right? Printing and mailing are costly because specifically if you have large number of respondents. When I say large number of respondents, the total number of respondents can be 500 to 1000, right? So printing 1000 forms, one form can be of 4 to 5 pages. So these kind of things are very costly. Response rate may be low, right? How the response rate can be low? Because in interview you are necessarily sitting in front of somebody, asking them questions, need them to answer some particular questions. But what happens in questionnaire? You send them a questionnaire, right? And every individual has some priority in their life. So that questionnaire may not be the priority for the researcher. So you need to follow up a lot if you want a questionnaire to be filled by a researcher. Researcher may provide only socially acceptable answers. So no point in keeping the responses that cannot be answered correctly. No point in writing down the responses that that are not socially acceptable or that not most of the people will opt for. There is less chance to clarify ambiguous answer, right? This is a disadvantage of questionnaire that you know uh, because questionnaire has somebody is writing it down, they are not talking to you, they are not describing a particular answer. So what you can do is, if you have an ambiguous answer or you do not have clarity in the answer, how will you approach the respondent again? Because respondent has a limited time. You have sent the questionnaire, he is written in some ambiguous language that you are not able to understand. So sometimes this also becomes difficult. respondents must be literate and with no physical handicaps. So, as I've already told you, that these are the disadvantages that go with the questionnaire as a research instrument. How? See, respondents must be literate enough and no physical handicaps should be there, because how will they fill the paper if they cannot read it? Definitely, you can facilitate them, but how about a sample size of 1,000 respondents? How will you go about it? Rate of retrieval can be low because retrieval itself is difficult, right? So rate of retrieval can be low. You cannot reach out to a respondent, each and every respondent, specifically if you have a large sample size. Now we have come to the second part, which is called as interview, right? Interview is different from questionnaire in many aspects. So in questionnaire, you are sending a sheet, you are sending a questionnaire, and the respondent is filling that questionnaire for you. Now, what happens in an interview? In an interview, you are interacting with somebody to find out his attitudes, opinions, or his thinking about a particular thing or a particular concept. In a sense of an oral questionnaire, instead of writing the response, the interview gives needed information orally and face to face. With a skillful interviewer, the interview is often superior to other data gathering device. So, if the interviewer is very experienced, he knows how to collect data, how to gather data very nicely, how to touch each aspect of a particular questionnaire, how to dig out the things which the respondent doesn't want to share, right? If you are very comfortable with the respondent, if you have an influential personality and you are wise enough to take out all the information that a respondent is having, then interview becomes one of the most important method. But for that, skill is very important. The purpose of the interview, what are the purposes of interview? The first is to verify information gathered from the written sources, to clarify the points of information, to update information, and to collect data. So these are the types of interview: structured interview or standardized interview, unstructured interview, and telephonic interview. Right? So these are the three types of interview that we have to understand. The first is called as structured interview, or it can be called as standardized interview. So when I'm talking about standardized interview or structural interview, they have a particular structure and you cannot change the structure of that. They are very fixed, closed-ended questions that the respondent need to answer, and a very little scope is given to deviate from the questions, right? These kind of questions are happening in job interviews or personality tests or psychological techniques. Unstructured interview, the name suggests unstructured, do not have a structure. What kind of things do not have a structure? In which we want elaborate information. We want information from all the dimensions of a particular subject. So that is called as unstructured interview. We have telephonic interviews also. When you cannot approach the respondent, you can approach him on telephone, right? So that becomes telephonic interview. So these are three types of interview. Now the question is, what kind of interview should be used when, right? When is the right time to use a particular type of interview? So the answer is that it depends on your research type or your research design. As I've already told you that, if you have a very exploratory topic to cover, if you have very elaborate thing to cover, then probably the most effective technique will be unstructured interview, because you want to interview the experts, you want to take their help, you want to take their opinion on finding out the result for a particular interview, right? So that becomes unstructured interview. If you are very clear about the objectives of the research, you are going for a descriptive research or you are going for a causal research, then you need to use structured research. Specifically, if you have very limited number of individuals to be questioned on. And then finally, you have telephonic interview when you cannot approach the researcher. You have a good workforce with you who can help collect data. So that becomes telephonic interview. Then you can use telephonic interview. Now we have come to rating scale. Okay. After we have studied that there are two methods on which we through which we collect data. The first is called as questionnaire and the second is called as interview. Now when to use which method, I have explained you earlier, depends on the kind of research study, depends on your sample size, depends on the scale of information you want, right? Next is rating scale. Rating scales involves qualitative description of limited number of aspects of a thing or traits of a person. So what is rating scale? It involves qualitative description of a limited number of aspects of a thing or traits of a person. So we are explaining the traits of the person, right? In rating scale. So we have Thurstone technique, we have Likert method, Likert scale, or we have semantic differential scale. These are the three scales that we generally use. The simplest of all the devices consists of a prepared list of items. The presence or absence of the item may be indicated by inserting the appropriate word or number. Now, what is sociometry? Sociometry is a technique for describing the social relationship among individuals in a group. In an indirect way, it attempts to describe attractions or repulsion between the individual by asking them to indicate whom they would choose or reject in various situations. So, whenever we want to describe the social relationship of individuals in a group, we use this technique which is called as sociometry. It is an indirect way it attempts to describe attractions or repulsions between the individual and what are the reasons behind those, right? Next is document or content analysis. This is again another technique of data analysis. It is used as a main tool of research or a subsidiary tool, right? It can be used as a main tool also and it can be used as a subsidiary tool also. When I say main tool it is used in whenever you are doing a historical research, right? Or subsidiary tool when it can be used as a subsidiary tool when you are doing a descriptive research or you are doing a experimental research, right? So in historical research, when you do not have a respondent to answer your question, you have to use the documents, the data, the literature, which is already available, right? When you are doing a descriptive study or maybe you are doing an experimental study, then it is always better to use is as a subsidiary tool. Then we have scorecard. Scorecard is a rating that may yield a total weighted score that can be used in evaluating communities, buildings, sites, schools, or textbooks. Similar in some respect to checklist and rating scale. So when do we use scorecard? It is basically a rating scale that yield a weighted score that can be used in evaluating. Evaluating what? Evaluating communities, buildings, sites, schools, and textbooks. So this is again another technique. Teacher or research made tools, very popular in research, part of overall instruments. If combined with other standardized tests in the assessment of individual operations and situations. So teacher made tools can be used. Tape recorded data. Observed through the ear as well as through the eye. Also used videotape recorder or radio cassette recorder. So it is used when you are observing. Observation is kind of a research tool that you are using. So either you are looking at the footage of CCTV camera or you are observing the respondents by sitting at a distance. or you are just observing them, you know, directly through your ears and through your eyes. You are just observing the respondent just like that. Okay. Now we have an opinionaire. What is an opinionaire? An information form that attempts to measure the attitude or behavior of an individual, which is also called as attitude scales. So as I've already discussed you that there are some things, there are some features that we cannot actually measure. These are attitudes, beliefs, and all those things, right? So we have some attitude scales also, which is called as opinionaire, right? Then we have observation. In observation, we are perceiving data through senses, through sight, through hearing, through taste, through touch, and through smell, right? So we are observing data through these things. Most direct way used in studying individual behavior is observation. Now we have types of observation: participant and non-participant observation, structured, unstructured observation, controlled and uncontrolled observation. Right? So, when you are informing the participant that he is participating in observation, it becomes participant observation. When the participant is not aware of the observation method, you are just observing them from a distance, it becomes non-participant observation. Structured information means the participant is aware about that particular thing, and unstructured observation means the participant is not aware about a particular observation. Controlled and uncontrolled observation, right? Then we have psychological test, an instrument designed to describe and measure a sample of certain aspects of human behavior is called as psychological test, right? You want to measure the attitudes, aspects of human behavior, then you use psychological techniques. You perform tests, paper and pencil test, achievement test, personality inventory test, and you use projective techniques to find out what is going on in the mind of the researcher. Then you have ready to use instrument or standardized test. Product of long years of study tend to be highly reliable and cover a wide range of student performance level. So there is a wide range of performance level which is already listed in the instrument, and you have to use one. Criteria for measuring research instruments. Now we have studied what the research instruments is all about. Now how do we measure that whether this research instrument is appropriate for the study or not, whether it is reliable or not? So there are three measures through which you can calculate the reliability of your research instrument. The first is called as validity. So validity measure what is intends to measure, right? Right? Whether this scale is valid or not, whether this scale is measuring what it meant to measure or not. Now types of validity is content validity, criteria validity, and construct validity. We have three levels of validity. When you talk about content validity, it is about expert judgment and table of specification. When you talk about criteria validity, it describes on the type of criteria you have and whether this response research instrument is valid or not. Next is called as construct validity. Construct validity means whether the questionnaire is constructed nicely or not. The next thing that we have to understand is reliability. Reliability is maintaining consistent measurement in a test administered twice, right? So in this reliability, you are measuring whether the test is consistent or not, whether you can rely on that particular test or not. Now, how can we measure the reliability of a test instrument? The first is test-retest method, using that instrument for a number of times that reduces the uh, sampling error or the scale error. Next is alternate or parallel form. You have two different kind of scales. Use them and test their answers, right? Split half method. half of the test you use for one method, half of the test you use for other respondents, and rational equivalence method, right? We have also one which is called as pilot study or field run. This also uh, you can do when you are doing a scale study. Next thing that you need to keep in mind is ensure efficiency and effectiveness of instrument in gathering the needed data. Ensure that the instrument, say questionnaire, is objective, simple, meaningful, easily administered, and adequate in collecting the data. Be able to obtain accurate and reliable data in the procedure of investigation. Be able to obtain recommendations and suggestions for enrichment of the instrument. After pre-test or tryout, revision must be made in content, structure, format, mechanics, organization before an actual investigation is made. Right? So today we have covered this very important topic of research instrument. We have understood in today's class that there are basically two types of research instrument that can be used. If two or three types of research instrument that can be used when you are collecting the data. The first, the most accurate one is called as questionnaire. Now, questionnaire can be structured, it can be unstructured. That means it can be either open-ended or it can be closed-ended. You can use observation method also, you can use interview method also. It depends on the kind of research you have, it depends on the kind of data analysis, the total number of respondents you have, on the kind of technique you are using. We have also seen that there are three constructs with the help of which you can measure the reliability of your scale, which is validity and reliability and accuracy, right? We have different statistical techniques and tests that can calculate for us the reliability and validity of scale also, that we are going to cover in the coming classes. I think that's enough for today, and I'm giving you a small assignment also. Uh, Today we have covered types of research instruments, right? So you have to read any two research paper of your choice, and you have to study the questionnaire or whatever research instrument the researcher has used. You have to study those. You have to copy paste that the research title and the research instrument in your copy, so that you can understand that what is the type of research problem they have and what is the kind of research instrument they have actually used, right? So I think that's enough for today. Thank you so much for listening and joining. I am ending the meeting now.